Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Good evening. I'm Keith Virgil, and I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date, as near as my sponsor and I can figure out, is sometime in August of 1991, so I've chosen September 1 for my sobriety date. I was one of them that might have been just a little bit sicker than some of the others. Last time I spoke in front of a group about this size, I was really nervous, and I had some people tell me what I should do when I'm really nervous, and I did that, and it worked. So I think I'm going to do it again tonight, because that wonderful magnifying mind of an alcoholic can work whenever we put it to work. So I'm just going to imagine that everybody in this room is stark naked. I'm going to close my eyes for just a little bit. And now, before I start to talk, I'm going to wait a couple minutes while you men get dressed. I really thought I could do this, but I don't believe I can. You gals are going to have to get dressed too. I don't know, Buzz, could you tell the Al-Anons from the alcoholics? Yeah, Al-Anons, they all covered up like this, I like to read a little something out of the big book. Brought my glasses with me so I could see it. Something that I believe happened to me. It starts out on page 24. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. This tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it is suspected. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. Like I said, I believe that is what happened to me. And then on page 12, there's some very powerful words that probably saved my life. And I would like to read here. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Now, this next sentence is probably the most important sentence in the big book to me. It starts out with the two most important words. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. I was raised in a family. I have 5 brothers. Parents who were hard workers. Neither one of my parents ever touched a drop of alcohol. So why I'm an alcoholic? Don't know. Don't care today. But I am, and it doesn't shame me to admit it. We grew up on a farm. We had the chores to do. We had horses. We all had our own. My dad was a real hard worker, and he didn't have a whole lot of time to spend with us kids. But when he did, we were all kind of selfish, kind of fighting over him. And this is something I'm not proud of today, but I'm also not ashamed of it. I had to be sober almost 14 years before I realized how much my dad loved me, because I started to remember some of the things in my childhood. I was the one who got to lay on the couch with him after supper to watch television. I was the one he picked up and carried to bed when I fell asleep. And yet he was the one that when I got home from Vietnam, I thought he handed me a resentment on a silver platter. And instead of grabbing the silver platter, I grabbed the resentment. And I took that resentment and I nurtured it and I fed it and I made sure it grew. And I did a very good job of that, of making it grow. When I got home from Nam, I come home a wild and crazy SOB. I came home with the attitude, you took 2 years of my life away from me and you owed it back to me. And I set out to get it. I did a lot of drinking, and it wasn't the type of drinking yet for me where I couldn't stop when I wanted to. If something good in my life happened, I could stop drinking, but only for a little while. Only for a little while. When I met my wife, I was able to stop drinking for a year. We got married. We started to have kids. And she started spending more time with the kids, giving the kids more attention than what she was giving me. And I thought that was a reason to pick up a drink. I was very selfish from the beginning. Very selfish. When my oldest son was around 4 years old, my wife gave me a resentment on a silver platter. And I took that resentment and I fed it and I nurtured it and I made sure it grew. And our marriage lasted 25 years before we got divorced. And it was all because of resentments. All because of resentments. I'd like to back up a little bit now. When I tell my story, I jump all over the place because my life never made any sense to me anyway. So why in the hell should I tell it like it does? When we were kids growing up, I didn't know this until after I'd gotten sober, but I guess I was kind of hard to live with. But there were times when all of us kids could play together. And when we did, we'd always have a good time. And I remember one Sunday afternoon, we was waiting for my aunt and uncle from Davenport to come and visit because they were our favorite aunt and uncle. And we was out in the yard and we was all playing ball. And Dad was playing with us. And I thought, wow, isn't this great? Isn't this just absolutely great? Dad's playing. And then when they got there, the game quit. And there I was again. The resentment handed to me right there again on a silver platter. That's the kind of person I was at the time. I could take anything and turn it into resentment, good or bad. I could make a resentment out of it. It was not hard for me to do. But after, we kept on going, and in school was very, very difficult for me. I had one of them things, if today they diagnose it with some big fancy name, and I had it, didn't matter because I didn't like school anyway. But I managed to get through school, managed to graduate, and that's when I got the letter from Richard Nixon inviting me into the Army. And I went to basic training in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, went to AIT in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and then I got stationed in Fort Eustis, Virginia. And when we got out there, we had absolutely nothing to do for 6 weeks. So what did we do? We experimented with a little bit of alcohol. And I found that I could really enjoy it. There were several times in my life I found I could enjoy it. I remember my very, very first drink. I was 12 years old. It was one swallow of beer. When I put that beer in my mouth, it tasted so foul, I swore I would never put anything like that in my mouth again. When I turned 18 years old, I went to meat cutting school in Toledo, Ohio. And one night after class, a bunch of the guys got together and went down to a bar to drink and invited me to go along. And I went. And there I had my first drink. And it was different this time. That first drink was different. It did not taste foul. And it did something for me that the first one didn't. It made everything okay. It took away the fear. It took away everything that had led my life up to that point. It took away the guilt. It took everything away. And I found out something was working for me, and I found my new best friend. And I did not let go of that for a number of years. Afterwards, I was in Virginia, September 12th, I believe it was 1966. They flew us to San Francisco, California, put us on a ship, and shipped us over to Vietnam. I spent a year over there. It's a year I don't want to relive, but it's also a year I've dealt with, and I'm okay with it today. But like I said, when I got home, I came home a wild, crazy son of a bitch with that attitude. I got a job in a little town where I lived for 25 years, and I was a meat cutter there for about 3 years in the grocery store. And one of the guys that worked there, he liked to drink just as much as I did. And we would do it almost every night of the week. And I did that for almost a year until I met my wife. And once I met her, I was able to quit the drinking. At that point, I was still able to quit. And after we got married, like I said, we started to have kids, and I still wasn't drinking. I wasn't even social drinking. There was no need for me to drink at that time because I thought life was wonderful. I had the kids, and I had her. And the only reason I believe that I was so happy is because the hell hadn't started yet in the marriage. I hadn't blossomed yet. Then when my oldest son was 4 years old, the resentment came, and the hell started. And we lived that way for I don't know how long. And then we had a second, and she was a girl. And I was proud as a peacock, you know. 'Cause we belonged to a card club, and there was 8 couples in the card club, and none of them had a daughter yet. We were the first one in that club to have a daughter, and I thought that was just something special. And that little girl was very special to me. And the oldest boy and her, when she became 3 years old, he was 5 years old, there was a little lake over by the town where we lived, and it was called Larson's Lake. And we'd go out there and we'd fish, and they would just have a wonderful time. And 2 miles east of that was another little farm pond where we'd go. And the county had one of them great big sand piles out there, and the kids used to climb up that and just have a wonderful time. And I thought, wow, aren't I a great dad letting my kids do this? But that's about all I did with them. But yet I could tell myself how great I was. You know, I had the intentions, but I didn't have the actions. When these 2 kids got a little older, the third one came along, and he was now in Ames, living with his girlfriend, getting along just wonderful. And when he was born, you know, I was able to quit drinking again. Why, I don't know at that time, but I was. There was something different about him when he was born. And it was shortly after when he was born, he was like maybe 2 years old, something like that. My wife and I got into an argument. Don't even remember what it was about, but I'm sure it was real important, if I can't remember it. And that's when the hell and the craziness started. I left the house that night and I was gone for a week. Don't know where I went, but that's the way we lived for the next, I don't know how many years. When my oldest boy was 15 years old, he started climbing out the upstairs window because he was afraid to come downstairs to leave the house. And he would be gone for a week, 2 and 3 weeks at a time because he couldn't stand to live in the alcoholic hell. And he did this for 3 or 4 years while he finished school. And he would come home every once in a while and try it again. He might be home for a day and he might be home for 2 weeks. But sooner or later, he'd be out that upstairs window again because he couldn't stand to live in the alcoholic hell. And my youngest daughter, this is something I'm not proud of at all, but today I have dealt with this, and it took a lot of time. But my youngest daughter used to lock herself in the room. And I went up there one night, and I wanted to talk to her. And her door was locked, and she wouldn't let me in. So I kicked her door in. And I went in, and I started screaming and yelling at her, wanting to know what the hell was going on. A few years later, that little girl saved my life. It was one of them times when I was giving my wife hell. She was standing out in the kitchen. And we had a real small kitchen. And as she said something to me that totally got me. And my daughter was standing beside her. And when my wife said that, I took a step towards her, and I was going to hit her. And that would have been the first time. But my daughter stepped in between her mother and me, and she said, "Dad, you are a controlling son of a bitch." And I took a step backwards, and I opened my mouth, and I was going to let her have it, but nothing would come out. I opened my mouth again, and I was going to let her have it, but nothing would come out. So I left. I owned an old building in the town we was living in at the time, and I went down there. And in the basement of that old building, there's one of these old-style freezers. You know, the real old style that had the sliding glass doors on top, probably weighed 1,000 pounds. And I had a dirty, filthy old mattress down there, and I put that on top of that, and some dirty old blankets and a dirty old pillow. And that's where I stayed for 2 weeks. And I had my beer with me all the time, because I liked beer. Once in a while I would drink whiskey, but I liked beer. And in this building were a bunch of mice. And they would run from one room to another. And one night, when I was laying on that freezer, one of the mice ran through, and it came back, and it stopped right at the end of the freezer. And it stood up on its back legs. And I picked up a shoe, and I tried to throw it at it, but my arm would not move. I tried it again, and my arm would not move. And then I heard the mouse say, "What a waste, what a waste." And that's exactly how I felt. I felt like a total waste. And I went home, and I went down in our basement, and I walked over by our washer and dryer, and there were some dirty clothes laying on the floor. And I fell down on all fours on them clothes, and I just said, "God, I can't do this anymore. I just can't do this anymore." And a feeling came across me. It came from the inside out. It was greater than any feeling I'd ever felt from the bottle. And I got up, and I went to the phone. This was about 2:30 in the morning. And I went to the phone, and I started looking up AA, and I couldn't find it. I went to the Yellow Pages, and there was a treatment center listed in Cherokee, Iowa. So I called that number, and they said, "We are closed, but if you are desperate and in need of help," that's the exact words it said, "please call this number." And I had to call that number in Cherokee 3 times just to get those numbers written down on a piece of paper so I could call a number in Sioux City, Iowa, of a treatment center. And I called that number in Sioux City, and I got a live person. And that person started talking to me, and I started listening. And I said a few words, don't know what it was. But then I heard her say some magical words, and maybe they're some of the only words I heard her say. What she said was, You don't have to drink anymore if you don't want to drink anymore. And then she talked a little bit more, and I heard some more magical words. She said, you don't have to hurt anymore if you don't want to hurt anymore. And then she started talking some more, and she told me that she worked for a treatment center up there. And if I wanted to go to treatment, they could get me in for 2 weeks. And all I said was, I won't be here in 2 weeks. And she said, just a minute, let me go check. She said, now, please don't hang up. Please don't hang up. And she went back and talked to somebody. I imagine her checked her schedule or something. But she said, we are really full, but if you need to be here, we could get you in Monday night. This was on a Thursday night I was talking to her. Monday night I was in that treatment center. I don't remember much about it. What I do remember, when I got out, they handed me a whole bunch of papers. And I don't remember signing any of them, but my name was on every one of them. That's how the kind of shape I was in when I went in. It was an outpatient treatment program, and I drank the whole way through it. But I finished it. I made it to the end. It's probably the first time in my life I had finished anything that I started. The next year was absolutely the worst year of my life. It was after I got out of treatment. I got out on a Thursday night. Friday night I was drunk. That Wednesday night I was at a meeting in Cherokee, Iowa. And you know what it's like with the old timers when you're new. You walk in, you see all these old SOBs laughing, smiling, having a good time, enjoying life. Now right there is a resentment that you can grab a hold of. You can nurture and you can feed that, which I did. I was the last one in. I sat in the door, or the chair closest to the door. When the meeting was over, I was gone. The next Wednesday, I was at the meeting again. Last one in, chair closest to the door, meeting over, gone. The next week, I went to the meeting again. Last one in the door. 4 of them old SOBs were sitting in my chair closest to the door. I had to walk clear around the room, sit in the chair furthest away from the door. When the meeting was over, I was up, boom, I was going to be out of there. But I had to go by the coffee pot. 2 of these old SOBs were standing there. And one of them, very gently, grabbed me by the arm. And he said, would you like to talk? And I said, yes. And both of them started talking. I don't remember a single word they said. But when I walked out of that door, I had 2 phone numbers. A few days later, I'd had it. I hadn't drank yet, but I was ready to explode. So I got on the phone and I called him. I called the first number. He wasn't home, didn't answer. I called the second number. I got an answer. You know what he said? Why don't you come down? You believe that? Talking to an old drunk like me, inviting me to his house. So I went down there. When I got there, I want to describe this for you because this played out many, many times in my early sobriety. When I got there, we went in the living room. This guy turned out to be my sponsor, by the way. He was sitting in the easy chair. His wife was sitting on the couch. His 2 girls were laying on the floor, and they were watching television. And then they did something I totally didn't understand. They started talking to each other. I didn't understand that. Communicating, I didn't understand that. And then they started to laugh, and I didn't understand that. And I got up, and I was ready to leave. So I started for the door, and both him and his wife went to the door with me. The sponsor gave me a handshake, and then his Al-Anon wife did that unforgivable thing. She gave me a hug. And she said, please come back. That was the first time in a long, long time anybody had invited me back anywhere. I'd like to stand here and tell you that was my sobriety date, but it wasn't. I had to go home and I had to drink some more for a couple weeks. Back to the Wednesday night meeting. Those guys were still sitting in the chair closest to the door. And when I'd leave, I didn't have to run out the door. I could stop and I could listen. And then one time I went on I think about a 3-week bender. And there was another guy living in the town I lived in who was in the program. And I went out to this little lake where I'd been doing a lot of my drinking. And I only took a 6-pack with me this time, and I don't know why. But when that was gone, I went back to town. When I got back to town, at a stop sign, I had a choice. I could make a right turn and go up 3 houses, and that would be his house. Or I could go down to the Casey store and buy more beer. For some reason, I chose to make the right-hand turn. When I got to his house, he came to the door. And I said, I've started drinking again and I can't stop. And he said, we have company. I'm going to ask him to leave, and then you're going to come in. He asked his company to leave, and they left. And then he invited me in. We got into the middle of his living room, and he stopped me right there. And he said, we can either sit here and we can talk, but if you need to finish what you started, I'll go buy you a 12-pack. But you're going to drink it right here so you don't hurt yourself. I heard it again. I never realized I was hurting me. I never realized I was hurting you. I didn't understand any of that stuff. He started taking me to a Monday night meeting. So now I'm getting 2 meetings a week, that Monday night and the Wednesday night. And every once in a while I'd make a phone call, and he would just say, why don't you come down? Then I got to where I started whining to him because I thought, man, I can start to trust this guy. So I can start whining. And he would listen to me for a little while, and then he would say something, I don't know what he'd say, but it was nice, you know. So I was liking that. One time I called him, and I started whining, and he interrupted me. And what he said was, it's become apparent to me that I don't have anything you want. But if the day comes, I have something you want, please call. But if that day never comes, I won't bother going to your funeral. Click. I thought about that. What is this man telling me? And I thought about it, and I thought about it. And I had to drink. I had to drink over it. But a few days later, somehow I stopped drinking again. I don't know how I could do that. But then it happened. I started welling up on the inside again. And I would feel like I was about ready just to explode. And I went to the phone and I called him. And he said, why don't you come down? So I went down again. And the same thing in the living room again. And a few weeks later, the same thing. I had to call him. This time it was different, because in the meantime I had been working on a 4-step. It was not important to me to do steps in order. But I went down to his place, and we went through the usual living room routine. And then he went and he grabbed his big book and a flashlight. And he said, we're going to go out to the picnic table. And we went out there, and he started talking a little bit. And pretty soon, he said, now we're going to start talking about the steps. And I am so grateful that he talked to me, not from where he was at and with his understanding of the steps, with his 11 years of sobriety, but he talked to me from where I was at with no sobriety. I'm so grateful for that. And he started talking about step one, and he talked about it for a while, and then he said, early in my sobriety, I went to a meeting, and the person who read how it works misread the first step. And he said the way they read it was, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unbearable. That's where my life was. My life was totally unbearable. And I was able to take that and I was able to use that for a beginning with the first step. Then he started talking about the second step. Came to believe in a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. I was okay with the came to believe in that part of it. And then he went on to say that word sanity, restore us to sanity. He said that kills a lot of alcoholics because they don't understand it. Because all that means is restore us to a right way of living. And I could take that and I could use that because I darn sure hadn't been living the way I wanted to live. And if something or anything or anybody could restore me to a right way of living, I was willing. I was totally willing. Then we went on and we did a third step that night, kind of the way it says to do it in the big book, with a sponsor, with somebody else. And the way we did it was he grabbed his flashlight and he opened his book to the third step prayer. And he said, what we're going to do is we're going to hold hands and we're going to read this prayer together out loud. I said, okay. So I took his hand and we started to read. But in my mind, this thought was going, what a bunch of BS. We got about halfway through that prayer, and that same thought was in my head, what a bunch of BS. We got to the end of the third step prayer. Something happened to me that I cannot explain. It happened again. That feeling came in me again from the inside out. I knew that I didn't have to drink again if I didn't want to drink again. I went on and we did a fourth and a fifth step that night. How I did my fifth step was my sponsor started sharing some of his first. I had mine written out on paper. When it came my turn to talk, he just looked at me and said, now put your book away and just start talking. And that's what I did. And one of the first things out of my mouth that I did not have on paper was something I swore I was going to take to my grave. But for some reason, it came out. And there were other things that came out that I swore I was going to take to my grave. A miracle happened that night. I can't explain it. I can't explain it. But one thing I can explain, I was totally willing to have something different in my life. I was done with the hell. I was done. When I was about between my third and my fourth year of sobriety, my dad was dying. And 2.5 years earlier, they only gave him 6 months to live. But he lived another 2.5 years. And I truly believe today that was God keeping him alive long enough for me to make amends. One time when I went up there, I could never get him by myself. My youngest son went along. We were in the living room with my dad and my mom, and we were just visiting. And all of a sudden, my mother looked at my youngest son and said, let's go for a walk. There I was. I had my dad to myself. I had what I'd been wanting for a long time. And I was able to start making amends with my dad, the verbal amends. Then when we got ready to leave, I did the living amends. I gave my dad a hug, and I told him that I loved him. And I told my dad I couldn't blame him anymore for my life being the way it was. Shortly before he died, I was making more amends to him, and I was getting kind of cocky and arrogant in my sobriety at that time. And when I was making my amends, my dad interrupted me with whatever I was saying, and all he said was, son, there are some people who can make it through life without a crutch. He stopped me dead in my tracks. Another one of them times I wanted to open my mouth and let him have it, but my mouth wouldn't open. But instead, I listened to what he had to say. And I'm so grateful I was able to do that, because I was able to see the pain I had caused him. I was able to see the pain I had caused my mother. My drunkenness cost my kids a lot, and it cost my folks a lot. My drunkenness cost my kids a relationship with their grandparents. My drunkenness caused my folks a relationship with their grandkids. That's something I can never give to them. Both my parents are gone. I cannot give it to either one of them. That's something I have to live with. And I'm okay with it today. I'm okay with it today. Why am I okay with it today? Because something has happened to me on the inside to where I know that I'm not that person anymore. And I know today I don't have to be that person anymore. At the same time, when my dad was dying, I was going through a divorce. And when my dad died, we couldn't find my oldest son. We had no idea where he was at. We hadn't seen him or heard from him for over 3 years. The youngest two kids were at the funeral. After the funeral was over, and we were out at the cemetery, I have 5 brothers. 5 brothers were pallbearers. I got to carry my dad to his grave. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I was still drinking. And during the service out at the gravesite, my daughter was standing right behind me. And she put her hands on my shoulders and she squeezed. That's something I could have never experienced without you people. I could have never experienced that. Over the years, I started making amends with a couple of my brothers. Went up to one of my brothers. He lives just a few miles north of where I was living at the time. And we'd begun to have a relationship by this time. And I went up and I started making amends to him again that day. And this was the day I learned what kind of a kid I was growing up, because he's the one who had the courage to tell me that I was an SOB to live with when we was growing up. I'm so grateful for hearing the things I didn't want to hear, because those are the things I needed to hear. Had I not heard that, I might still be that SOB. I may still be. I've made amends to all my brothers but one. It's not because I don't want to, I'm willing. It's because he will not make himself available. And that's okay today. Today, that's okay. Because in the book it tells me if I can't find the person to make direct amends, I can write a letter, and all I have to do is be willing to make those amends when the time comes. I'm willing to do that when the time comes. And it's all because of you people. Without you people, I would not have been able to do any of this. Without a loving God, I would not be able to do any of this. To find the God of my understanding has been a journey. It's been a journey. I always used to say that my first God of my understanding was a tree. The reason I chose a tree is because I heard an old timer talking at a meeting one time, that's what his first God was a tree. And the reason I chose a tree, that little lake where I drank, there was an old willow tree. And I went out there in sobriety, and I looked at that tree. It's the ugliest, old, scraggliest willow tree you ever saw. But for some reason, I could sit under that tree when I was drinking, and I could feel some sort of peace. So I chose that tree when I got sober to be my God, because it was still working for me. I could go out there and sit under that tree and feel some sort of peace. But now that I've been sober a while longer, and as I look back, I believe my first God was something different. My bottom was simply this: couldn't drink any more, and I couldn't drink any less. I was on the fence that we talk about. This way, die; this way, sobriety. I chose sobriety. My first God pushed me to sobriety. What was it? My first God was desperation. I was totally desperate for something different. Totally desperate. As I progressed into the God of my understanding, I come across one that worked for me because I couldn't make any sense out of my life. I could make no sense out of it whatsoever. So the God of my understanding became this: my God expects me to screw up so he'll have something to do so he won't get bored. That God still works today sometimes. But I also have another God. I also have a loving God, a forgiving God, a God I talk to that I can't see. I can feel him, and I have felt him. I have felt my God. My God has many voices. Sometimes it's a male voice, sometimes it's a female voice. Doesn't matter. All I have to do is listen. That's all I have to do is listen. As time went on, my mom was getting up in years. And 4 years ago, March 31st, she had a severe stroke, and she died. We called the kids again, and once again, couldn't find my oldest son. 10 years had passed between my dad and my mom dying. None of us had heard from my oldest son in all that time. Once again, 6 brothers, 6 pallbearers, I got to carry my mother to her grave. And that's because of you people. That's because of you people. A miracle happened 2 years ago. Just out of the blue, I got a phone call. It was my oldest son. He was drunker than 3 sheets to the wind. He called me every name no father should have to listen to. But then I had to remember I used those names too on his mother. A year ago he called me. He'd been in a lot of trouble. And he was facing 5 years in prison. But he got a very understanding judge to where he didn't have to do any prison time. But he was sentenced to a halfway house for a year, 2 years, something like that. I don't know what it was. And he was sentenced to so many AA meetings a week. He invited me down to go to a meeting with him. And I went. We went down and we went to a meeting. It's all because of you people. You were there for me when there was nothing left of me. You put the pieces back together. I don't know how many times I tried to do it on my own. I had my first drink when I was 12, my last drink when I was 46. That's how many years I tried to do it on my own. And I couldn't do it. So I turned my life over to a bunch of people who couldn't manage their own, and you managed mine just fine. I'm totally grateful for the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I have to tell you, I don't know that I'd be sober without the program of Al-Anon. I've never been to an Al-Anon meeting, but I've talked with a lot of Al-Anon women. My first hug in the program was from an Al-Anon woman. The love that is in these rooms, the love that is in these houses. My sponsor bought a new house, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago. When I went down to his house and I was getting sober, I was the one sitting on the couch. After a while, when he moved, they were going to get all new furniture, and his wife wanted to throw that old couch away. He said, "No, that's Keith's couch. That couch is down in their basement today." My sobriety means something to somebody else too, not just me. It means something to other people. This gift is not just for me. If I get selfish and try to make it all about me and keep it for myself, I'm going to lose it. I know that. I have to share it. I have to give it away. That's some things I didn't understand when I got here. You know, the word surrender, I didn't understand that. Pass it on. How can you pass on something you don't have? A lot of things I understand today that I didn't in the beginning. It's all because you people had the patience to give me the time I needed. And I'm so grateful that my sponsor had the courage to tell me what I needed to hear. One time he told me, "Why don't you slow down and just let it happen instead of trying to make it happen?" Sobriety is not something I can make happen. Sobriety is a gift. This is just me. This is only my opinion. When my dad died and when my mom died, you know, I started looking at death. Why do some people get to live to be 80, 90 years old? Some people die at birth. Some people 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. Today, I'm a firm believer that when my work here is done, my time here will be done. I believe we're all given a job to do on this earth. Some people never get sober. To me, that's their job, is to not get sober. It's for me to see, so I won't want to go back. God's using them too. That's what I believe, and that's what works for me, so I use it. If something works for me, I'm going to use it. If it don't work for you, that's fine. But if it works for me, I'm going to use it. I have a co-sponsor today, and he's here with me tonight. And I'd just like to tell how come I have a co-sponsor. It's part of my story, so I'll share it with you. When I was between my 3rd and 4th year of sobriety, I don't know, maybe into my 5th, I'm not sure. But my sponsor was working for a company that he got a promotion, and it was quite a handsome promotion for him. But he had to go to work at nights, so we couldn't talk like we used to talk. I couldn't call him up and I couldn't hear, "Why don't you come down?" And he and I became apart. But I also grabbed a resentment there too. Resentments were just something that just flow into me. And the resentment was, how in the hell can you leave me at a time when I need you the most? A few days later, this guy that I'd seen at meetings. Never really talked to him, but he was single. And at that time, there weren't very many single people where we were living. And he just asked me if I'd like to go to a dance with him Saturday night. And I said, sure. And a friendship developed. And pretty soon I asked him to be my sponsor. He said, nope, but I will be your co-sponsor because I don't want to undo what your sponsor has already done. That was quite a lesson in humility for me. Quite a lesson in humility. And we developed a great friendship since then, and we've done a lot of things together, and we've traveled a lot of miles together. And today my first sponsor has a different job. He's back in the program. He's back to be my sponsor again. But neither one of them's tried to undo what the other one did. It works great for me. It works absolutely great for me. I see now it's 10 o'clock, so I'm going to wrap this up right shortly. My home group is the Friday night group, Cherokee, Iowa. It's called the TGIF group. We meet every Friday night at 8 o'clock at the Methodist Church. We invite the people from the treatment center down, and they come to our meeting. Somewhere in my 6th to 7th year of sobriety, I was struggling with step 3. And there was a person in the treatment center. She'd been there for 2 weeks. She was a young gal. And this night, the meeting just happened to be, the topic was the 3rd step. When it was her turn to talk, she did something hardly any of the treatment people do. She talked. And she said something that clicked for me. And I was able to get back into that 3rd step again and realize what it was doing. So today, when it comes time for somebody with no sobriety or little sobriety to talk, I love to listen to them because they might just be the messenger that's carrying the message that I need to hear. I've heard so many of the old timers tell the young people to shut up because you don't have a damn thing to say anybody wants to hear. I can't say that. I heard it from a newcomer. If it's working for me, I'm going to use it. Thank you very much.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.